and let's look at the difference in trajectory, right? So I'm consciously going to work towards achieving what this player was. So face down, wrist down. Welcome back to the channel, guys. Kerrod Gray here today on the range at Reigate Hill, standing next to my good friend, Alex Clapp. Alex, thanks for coming along.
Thanks for having me.
Alex is a top coach here based in the UK at Enmore Park Golf Club. And in today's video, we're going to be talking about some functional matchups for some specific individuals that instead of just trying to achieve positions for the look of it, that actually made a huge difference to their performance and outcomes. Lots of great information here. Stay tuned. Okay, Clappy, so we've got a pro out in front of us, and this is an interesting case, right? We generally see players, they kind of fall in two categories.
Yeah.
Right? They'll either be baseline really good at their short game.
Yeah.
Okay. And maybe their ball striking or their driving might be a little bit off.
Yeah.
Or vice versa.
Yeah.
Now, for myself, my tendencies throughout my career, have a little bit too much of a lead wrist cup, and I'm really good around the green with my hands and bunker play and everything like that. But squaring the face up sometimes has been a real challenge for me when I've been playing high level golf. And what we're going to be talking about here is quite an interesting example of a professional golfer, right, who was an incredibly good ball striker, but was struggling to control the launch conditions of his golf ball around the greens, his flight, his rollout. And we're going to talk specifically about the club face here, aren't we?
Yeah, so the club face more so on what the lead wrist is doing throughout the swing, okay? So this video on the right is an after video, okay? It is the after effects of what we were trying to do. What Ryan done historically was this club would get very, very kind of shut, and the lead wrist would get very, very bowed, right? That's what makes him an elite ball striker. Reason being is because he generates, what that helps him generate is the optimal impact alignments in terms of shaft lean, okay? Shaft lean promotes an increase in ball speed and a reduction of spin. Yeah. So full swing, hitting shots, perfect, okay? Around the greens, an increase in speed and a reduction of spin is kind of the opposite to what we want, right? We want a lot more spin and we want to bring the ball speed right down. Yeah. So because having too much shaft lean in this backswing pattern and how we move the club generated a lot of shaft lean and a lot of kind of forward shaft lean impact, this would then mean that the ball would come off it as shoot very, very hot. You can control trajectory a lot. So what we tried to do is, as you've just done there, is we tried to really feel like this lead wrist would go very, very cupped, and the club would kind of almost do the opposite to what you would imagine you'd like to see within a full swing, right?
Yeah, yeah. If you just set up to the ground here, we'll kind of just wrap that with a little bow there. If you swing halfway back for me, with the full swing, generally what we'd like to see is a baseline reference point for players who are pivoting correctly, and all things being equal, is that the club face here would match the spine angle for a full shot, right? That would mean that in the backswing, kind of everything's working in sequence, the wrist and everything, not for every golfer, but as a general rule of thumb, right, this is what we'd be looking for. And especially in the downswing, we would want to get it to return to that fashion. Now, what would happen as a result of doing so is this would encourage this lead wrist to bow, the club face to come in, let's say, a strong orientation to produce a lot of ball speed. Now, from the address position for pitching and around the green, when you're looking for more control over height, flight, and spin rates and control of the golf ball, we're actually looking for this face to tend to want to open a bit, right?
And what that does then is it reduces the amount of leading edge that you're promoting to the ball.
Correct.
Increases loft and bounce. Okay, and that's exactly what we want to do with
so
a short game shot.
Yeah, and absolutely. So just on that one point there, increasing the likelihood of using the bounce. So the bounce is the part of the golf club which is going to glide or result in a gliding and a bruising of the ground. Yeah,
it's the difference between the leading edge and the back end of the club that kind of interacts with the ground, basically.
Yeah, so as we can see on the left-hand side there was a huge difference between what this player was doing previously, where his face was shut, his lead wrist was too bowed, and then after we could see that the face was open, lead wrist was a little bit more cupped.
So what you actually see then with the player is when a lot of people say to you that the short game shot is very similar to the long game, it's actually quite false. There's some big differences between them and how to generate the optimal launch conditions and speeds that we were talking about to generate the shots required.
Totally.
Now, he had no problem hitting a high flop. Okay, because straight away He opened the face up, the lead wrist cupped, the bounce was there, and he was fine. But as soon as you said to him, hit this low driven shot, it was straight into that. He's feeling like he needs to do that to generate those launch conditions.
Was this a conceptual issue?
Definitely.
Yeah, okay.
And I think the idea of concept and the idea of how a player thinks is very underestimated, okay? As soon as you change their concept and you change how they actually think about what they're trying to do, they completely change their ideas and outset from there.
Correct.
Right? So actually just explaining to Ryan that getting that club face in a better position to optimize some bounce and loft on the club, to give him a little bit more margin for error, actually, because he wasn't using any bounce. He was using a lot of leading edge and getting a lot of kind of dig.
Yeah.
So actually opening up that loft, opening the bounce, and feeling like the bounce is the thing that was hitting that surface as opposed to that leading edge. He found that he could almost duff shots by about an inch behind them, but it wouldn't have much result on what was going on with the shot that he wanted to actually hit.
And we see that around the greens, right, is that we're actually looking for a flatter bottom to the swing, aren't we? So if we were to break this down in its most simplistic form, with a power shot as such, the golf club would be descending, the leading edge would be coming into play, and you'd be compressing and squeezing the ball between the club face and the turf. But with wedge play, essentially we're looking for a flatter bottom of the swing, so you actually have more room for error. So it doesn't have to be perfect. And sometimes the best pitch shots around a green or a lob shot is where you are hitting behind the ball, because it lowers the ball speed, right? And it gets the ball popping off in such a way where you can control the rollout, as opposed to really squeezing it down in there.
For sure, yeah.
A lot of players they're worried about hitting behind the ball, but if you move the golf club correctly, or in this way that's going to produce that, it actually works in your favor.
Absolutely, and that's why you get, you know, like a player like a Mickelson, right? That's got such a good short game because he's right-hand dominant, because he's right-handed, but he plays golf left-handed. So instantly then, and him and Jordan Spieth are probably the only two outliers in how they approach short game compared to more so the modern way of doing it now. They're very much a kind of hinge and hold pattern nowadays. But a lot that you see nowadays more so is constant radius. And making sure that that radius of your swing isn't getting wider and then narrower. It's just basically feeling, for me, like everything's more as a unit again.
Correct.
Everything's this. There's a little bit more freedom in what the hands are doing, and then your pivot dictates a lot of what goes on from there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Striking it.
So with this player specifically, let's talk about the adjustments that were made in a performance setting. So for example, we brought awareness that the club face needed to move in such a fashion where it was opening more, right? He felt like the lead wrist was cupping more. Outside of that, you gave him some ideas around what it should feel like.
Yeah, absolutely. Feel-wise was almost like he was hitting flop shots a lot of the time, okay? Because he felt like from that position, hitting a flop shot, he could open the face and kind of expose some bounce and loft. This lead wrist would stay in a lot more of extension. And then from there, or cupping. And from there, he was able to actually deliver the club better back to the ball to create those spin conditions and the actual, more so the trajectory that he was looking for.
So what I'll do here, just as a reference, right, and we can almost use the logo of my glove here just to highlight what this wrist is doing relative to, let's say, this is where this player was before, the club face was shut down, the back of my wrist and my glove there's pointing down to the ground. If I just hit a little stock chip just out in front of me, and we'll create a relatively similar swing length and speed, and let's look at the difference in trajectory, right? So I'm consciously going to work towards achieving what this player was. So face down, wrist down. Let's see what happens. Now, even through there, if you look at where my handle finished, that would be almost very much like you see a lot of players trying to achieve with like a punch shot sort of drill and soaring off, not letting the club head pass.
And you can also hear from the strike. I'm big into acoustics as well. Okay, of when you hit a shot, kind of understanding what a shot sounds like when it comes off the face. You could hear from that kind of clunky strike that it was very much a bit of a diggy action. There wasn't much lead in, there wasn't much bounce going on. Lot of dig, not much control over what the ball flight was doing. I mean, to be fair, you've done a pretty good job of actually getting the ball out there with the amount of leading edge and dig that you actually had in the shot. If you would have used the bounce a lot more with that, which you're going to demo for us now, you would have seen that it would have glided under the ball a lot more and you would have had a lot more spin.
And I think for the guys at home, you can get a player who is of a very high skill level. And they can even get to a professional level with these patterns, as this gentleman did. However, there are going to be limitations that they're going to come across when it comes to playing different surfaces and different golf courses. Now, when it's very muddy, right, and there's a cut pin, and the greens are fast, right? Down in Australia, we get a lot of short-sighted shots with not much room to work with a lot of greens that are kind of reverse tabletop like that. You can't really afford to be punching these balls in all the time.
And again, change the environment, change the numbers, you know? Like, that's why I'm big into getting out on the course with the player as well and experimenting, especially with this short game aspect, more so, that you're going to do a hell of a lot different things around the greens on the course at different lies, reading different lies, analysing how it's going to react, analysing what the spin rates are going to be like, how high you want to play it, low you want to play it, as opposed to just being around the green and just going, okay, chip, 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 chip.
Yeah.
And, you know, that's the difference in block practice compared to, you know, varied. And that's why you need to definitely, with students at the higher level, get out on the course with them and see how the environment changes them.
Yeah.
And again, there's stages to a swing change. You're going to get stages where they need to be able to do it on the range before they take it to the course. That's number one. But when they take it to the course, can they do it when they play by themselves?
Yeah.
Can they do it when they play with their friends? Can they do it in a practice round? Especially at the elite level, you can go through the stages of going practice round, tournament day 1, hole 18 to make the cut day 2, in contention day 4. You know, there's stages, majors, you know, there's a never-ending scale.
Challenge point.
Absolutely.
That's why you see, out of a whole field of players that could possibly enter and win a major championship like the British Open the other day, at the end of the day, there's going to be a select few golfers always at the top. And that's because their challenge point, they haven't met that quite yet. You'll find a lot of players, for example, if you or me were going to go play a major championship, there's a good chance we're going to miss the cut by a million shots.
Quite a big chance of that.
But we could go around this golf course playing with each other and shoot under par comfortably.
Yeah.
So it's just matching and understanding the golfer of where they're at and what they want to achieve. And for this player, it was a lot about getting this club face a little bit more open, so he had more variability and potential to hit shots around the green.
Absolutely.
So let's look at the flight now, just with the different pattern on the way back. So I'm trying to like really exaggerate this. The club face is pointing up to the sky. I actually even like to see more of the club face pointing at me, imagining it's a mirror.
Really good feel, yeah.
So as I go back, the lead wrist is cupping. We can see that's pointing a lot more towards the sky. Club face pointing at me. This definitely on a wildly different angle from where it was. Right?
Absolutely.
Let's have a look at the flight that comes off. Same sort of feel, same distance.
Yeah, good.
And we can see the ball through the air moved a lot slower.
Yeah, you can see the difference. You've seen it add a lot more spin as it come off the face.
Correct.
Point 1. What the wrist is doing directly influences where the face is. That's why a lot of our focus was on where his wrist conditions were, as opposed to thinking, I need to flare it open, because you can still flare it open and keep the lead wrist bowed.
Yeah.
Okay. So having the idea of, okay, that needs to move into a very cupped, extended position dictated what the face wanted to do for us as well. But you can see straight away, the aesthetics on that, not the aesthetics, sorry, the acoustics on that strike, massively different. You still didn't have the best strike, but you still created some good amounts of spin and some good amounts of trajectory that you wanted to.
Yeah, and if you were to ask me, did I hit that perfect? Well, no. But I felt like I had considerably more control over that second shot than I did the first.
Yeah, your margin for error is increased by no end.
Yeah, and we can see that the first one was stabby down into the ground, took a little bit of grass. This one here, I may have hit further behind, but that's the whole point in implementing elements like this into the motion, is you get that little bit of room for error. And I've got a nice little bruising of the ground without this leading edge chopping in and digging too much.
Exactly that.